Beta testing of Recreate It. It's WrestleMania 1 edition by Mr. Statistics. What this is basically a review comparison of a famous WrestleMania, obviously WrestleMania 1, but done in a different way. We're going to be using action figures to see if we could recreate WrestleMania. A few facts. The event took place on March 31st, 1985. The World Championship was not on the line at this event. The main event, however, was a 2-on-2 tag team match with Jimmy Snuka in Hogan's corner and Bob Orton Jr. in Piper's. Interesting fact also was that this was Hogan's first of 8 WrestleMania main events, including his WrestleMania Impromptu match. 22 wrestlers participated at this event alone. Now, a few rules before we begin. I'm only going to be reviewing matches that made TV. At the end of the event, I will run the stats and see how much of this could be recreated. I did also kind of put that on the sidebar on each slide, but going forward in the future, when I've hammered out the details and made it more streamlined, that will be the case. I'm only going to be judging on accuracy and attire representation, and also if the match could even be recreated in any figure form. If that means an LJN versus a Elite, if that's a Classic Superstar and a Legend of Pro Wrestling, if that's a WCW Toy Biz for any reason, and R3 Tech, anything's on the table, anything that's mass produced, of course. I will be including managers or I will not be including managers or valets or non-performers. I know Snuka and Bob Orton were in the main event, however, they were not actually in the match. If I was going to that, it could be something as little as Liberace ringing the bell, so I can't really do that. I'm just going to focus on only the actual contracted competitors during that event. I will not include custom figures. They must be retail released, either online or in-store, and at least marketed for mass release. That means basically if it's a small company that at least made 500 copies or 1,000 copies. Not to knock any customizers out there, that's not what this is about. This is about, have they produced enough people or the people possible to recreate WrestleMania 1 through 37 or SummerSlam or Survivor Series, which could become a later series if this is successful. I will not include custom figures. I already said that. We will see how many matches versus how accurate representation is during this. So we're going to be running the numbers at the end of it compared to how many matches. I know in the old WrestleManias there's a lot of matches, so we'll see. And lastly, I'm not a great computer guy, so until I learn a better format, this is how it will be represented, or presented, excuse me. Let's begin. WrestleMania 1. It's Tito Santana versus the Executioner. Now the Executioner, for those who didn't know, was Playboy Buddy Rose. Personal story, I met Playboy Buddy Rose. In fact, he was going to train me to be a pro wrestler when I was 17 years old. I was 6'6" and already about 250 pounds. I was a pretty big guy, but unfortunately had a medical issue come up, and by the time I was healthy, Buddy had passed away. He was only maybe 25 minutes from my location near Portland. He was at the Armory, so unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to ever wrestle him, but I did get to talk to him a little bit. He was very excited, very ecstatic to bring a guy of my stature in. But that's just a personal story. Anyway, it saddens me to know that unfortunately he's only ever had one figure. It's Madamania. The picture you see right here is the only mass release of Playboy Buddy Rose, and I wouldn't say it's mass released. To my knowledge, it was near the end of the AWA line. The company was going under. So you really can't recreate this match. I mean, you definitely can't, accurately recreate it, but you could recreate it if you want to hunt down a Playboy Buddy Rose. I had one once, not the best shape. It ran me about $80. I ended up selling probably $150. So I can only imagine how much a mock, pristine condition Playboy Buddy Rose would go for, especially in today's market. But there's never been an Executioner figure. I mean, obviously you could just grab a generic basic and throw some Executioner looking gear onto him. Wouldn't be too hard, but this would not be 100% accurate. So Tito also is not accurate. I mean, there are some LJNs that would closely represent what he was wearing. I think it was a red. Also, in the comments, let me know if you'd like me to put pictures down below of maybe what they both were wearing, if I can find them. Google is my only resource at the time. But if you know any other websites or something like that, or if you want to see that, if not, I'll keep it this way. And let's move on to the next one. Now, we got WrestleMania 2. Now, this is supposedly the shortest match of WrestleMania 2. It went longer than 8 seconds. I don't know who was counting the clock or starting the clock, but it clearly was not the case. King Kong Bundy versus SD Jones. Now, I know there's a Mattel King Kong Bundy. I know there's a Jack Pacific King Kong Bundy. I know there's a Legend of Pro Wrestling King Kong Bundy. I tried to find the most accurate representation as well as a figure that would match up with the only ever SD Jones figure. This is not from his attire in his match. He didn't wrestle with a shirt on. Even the variant Hawaiian version. But I mean, if you were to create this match, it's if you grew up with LJNs, great. I didn't, but it's pretty wonky. They don't have much. You can see there's no thigh cuts. There's no bicep swivel. There's no real movement whatsoever. So it's like body slam and then body splash. That's pretty much all you can really do. There's no elbow and collar and elbow tie up. Excuse me. So yeah, this is the best you could do with this. You could recreate it, but it would not be accurate. On to WrestleMania 3. It was Ricky Steamboat versus Matt Bourne. For those of you who did not know, Matt Bourne is the first Doink the Clown. He didn't actually debut though as Doink until the early 90s. I think 91 or 92. I'm not exactly sure. It could be 93 even. But this match could not be recreated, as no figure representing Matt Bourne has ever been made. They've never made just a Born Again Matt Bourne or just Matt Bourne in general. They did make a Doink representation, and people do say it's based off of him, but again, it's hard to tell. Doink is, you put any generic wrestler with a certain body build into a clown mask, and I mean, Chris Jericho was once Doink the Clown, and nobody had a clue it was Jericho until he took off the stuff, and you realize, oh wow, it's actually Chris Jericho under that. But this match could not be recreated in that its accuracy. If you want to see a Steamboat versus Doink match, I guess that would be an alternate weird universe where maybe they decided not to give Matt Bourne just Matt Bourne and they changed him to Doink. But and then Steamboat only has ever worn the Dragon tights. I've never found in this match he wrestled in trunks. I think they were white trunks or even black trunks. I have to check back. I think it's white. But Steamboat has only ever been made in trunk or in made in tights, never any trunks. So it's unique that they've never done that. I can understand why they didn't do it. He's more iconic as the Dragon, even though he was Ricky the Dragon Steamboat even in the trunks. He's only ever been in tights. So again, we can recreate it, but it would not be accurate. Match 4, however, is just a big flat no. David Sammartino has never had an action figure. Brutus Beefcake, now you're going to see that I put the Chase variant from Mattel that just recently came out. That was the online exclusive. It wasn't to tease anybody. I did this a while back. It looked the most colorful, most popping. I think he had a different attire. Might have been more yellowish in that thing. I know he played the heel during this match. But I couldn't really find at the time a good picture. I probably should just snap a photo of mine on mine, but I'm not a great photographer. I never claimed to be. But this match could not be recreated. There has never been a figure made of Bruno Sammartino. And David Sammartino. Despite having a Bruno Sammartino in his corner, Bruno never wrestled at WrestleMania, so I didn't even add him into it. But actually, that's not true. He did wrestle at WrestleMania. I need to update my material here a little bit. When I was doing WrestleMania 2, I found out he was in the Battle Royal. He didn't win the Battle Royal, but he was one of the people, and so he will be in there. So I do apologize for that when you're reading that. But as far as David Sammartino, I don't know when we're ever going to get one, if we ever will get one. He wasn't iconic. He didn't stand out, really. I mean, he did wrestle here and there. He was kind of like Eric Watts, famous. He was the son of a famous wrestler. But never really broke out on his own. He kind of lived off of what his parents did, or his father did, I should say. And I just don't see him in any top 10 desired lists. When we do top 10 on wrestling figs, or when they go on there and I see him in discussion boards, he's never on anybody's list. I think TL Hopper has a better chance of being made than a David Sammartino. And that's just unfortunately the way it is. Sometimes people come in, they get a shot at being the first WrestleMania, and they weren't memorable, they weren't desired, they weren't somebody you have to have in your collection. I mean, if you want to complete WrestleMania 1, even if it's not accurate, you're going to have a David Sammartino, but I just don't ever see that happening. Not in my lifetime, possibly not even in yours, whoever may be listening. On to the fifth match. Now, you notice I've highlighted in red here, this is the very first WWF Intercontinental Championship match, the first championship match ever to take place at a WrestleMania. It was champion Greg the Hammer Valentine versus the Junkyard Dog. Everyone thought Junkyard was going to win. Given the really, not to steal from OSW, but acceptable in the 80s, there was a very racially charged angle going on with this. Greg Valentine kept calling Junkyard Dog a nasty black person, which would not fly. I'm pretty sure it's on the network anymore, but it's a very, you thought Booker T and Triple H was bad. I mean, that was a world title match, but they kind of toned it down and used like just underhanded tactics. This was just straight up Greg Valentine saying you don't deserve this belt because the color of your skin. But this match could not be recreated accurately because the original IC title has never been made. Now, of course, if we're counting that'd be the case. But even if we're not counting that, you can recreate this match, but it would not be accurate. Even without the title, if we didn't even count the title ever being made, these two, they don't have the proper tires. I think Junkyard might have his proper tire, but to my knowledge, I don't think that's Greg's proper tire. I know he's an LJN out there, but his LJN was, I didn't choose it because it really doesn't look like him. It looked almost like a Paul Orndorff. But so I chose these two. Again, you could have a great match. The articulation with these two styles, let alone Jax, would be great, but two LJNs, not the greatest. And on to the sixth match, which is the WWF Tag Team Championship. Now, the U.S. Express consisted of Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda. And unfortunately, this is probably the closest you can get to them. Barry has a Mattel Elite, but it's in black. He's got the ponytail. When he was more in the U.S. Express, it was red, white, and blue colors. Mike was also kind of, I think, in a similar attire, if not singlet. I'd have to get in check about that. But that's the closest you can get to a U.S. Express is Mike Rotunda's IRS, because that's the only ever representation gimmick that they ever make in figure form of Mike Rotunda. He's only really, his claim to fame is the IRS gimmick. Even though he's a tag champion as Mike Rotunda, everybody remembers him as IRS as tag team champion with the $1 Million Man. However, it wouldn't be entirely accurate, but you do have the Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, who didn't have the proper tag belts because they've never made those proper tag belts. They kind of look like an old NWA type title anyway. This is back before a lot of customization started happening, which I've heard on different podcasts that it was very, very rare to get new belts produced. So it's kind of like whatever you could find, whatever local belt maker was around that was willing to throw something together real quick. So until they make them, this is the closest you can get. Is you got some old school tag team titles, again, not the proper ones. The Sheik and Nikolai Volkov are in figure form that represent that specific era. In fact, the Sheik is wearing the exact tire he wore at WrestleMania 1. But as far as Windham and IRS, that's the best you can kind of do in that situation. Now you have the WrestleMania 7th match. Now, WrestleMania 1, the 7th match, excuse me. This is the $15,000 Body Slam Challenge. It was Andre the Giant versus Big John Studd. This match could be recreated using Mattel Elites. Obviously, I put two pictures. I showed the LJN figures because they were the first ones, kind of. Although Andre's hair is not accurate for that time. By then, he was starting to sport the shorter hair, getting a little more heavier. There might be a Mattel Elite actually now that's been produced that matches that attire or that look from that time. Big John Studd, we have the new Legends that just came out. There's that 4-pack, classic Jack's Classic Superstars has him in one form. I do believe it's an earlier, maybe series. I can't think of it right now, but I know he was in a series. I used to have it. But you could use it as LJN. You could use it as a Mattel. It'd be able to recreate no problem. They've made countless forms of these two in different styles, but it would not be accurate to my knowledge. Then we got this WrestleMania 8, the eighth match of WrestleMania. The WWF Women's Championship. The challenger, Wendy Richter, versus champion Leilani Kai. This match could not be recreated, as no figure of Lani has ever been made, and may never be made. I know that Cyndi Lauper was also involved, and so was Fabulous Moolah, but again, I'm not counting them. There was a Jax Moolah made, but due to controversial circumstances, allegations, and accusations, we're just going to leave it live with that. I don't think Mattel's ever going to be in a desire to make her. She's not really featured on any top 10 women's lists right now. I know we got Mae Young, and that's cool, but Mae wasn't at WrestleMania 1 like Fabulous Moolah was. And then, of course, Cyndi Lauper, maybe, we got Mr. T. Maybe we'll get Cyndi Lauper down the road. But currently, right now, if you were to recreate this match, it would be Wendy comes out, they count 10, the opponent never shows up, and she wins by count out, or forfeit. So maybe one day we'll get Leilani Kai at least, and you can recreate the first ever women's WrestleMania match of Wendy Richter versus Leilani Kai. In case you didn't know, you want me to tell you who the winners are, but it was Wendy Richter who ended up walking out with the title. And then the main event. Only a couple matches on this card. Not as many as we'll get in other WrestleManias, but you had Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Mr. Wonderful, may he rest in peace, Paul Orndorff, and Rowdy Roddy Piper. Interesting fact about this is, unfortunately, the heel team is both now deceased. Hogan and Mr. T are still around. Mr. T is still out there doing stuff. Hogan's still being Hogan. And what's interesting is, conversely, Bob Orton, who was on the heel side, still around, and Jimmy Snuka, unfortunately, is deceased. So out of the 6 men, 3 are unfortunately gone. But this match could be recreated using Mattel Elite figures. However, it would not be accurate. Mr. T wrestled in red tights, not blue. So it's so close. I mean, I pictured a bunch of LJN figures, but you could easily put a Hogan in there. The belt, though, is, to represent it would be the LJN figure. I think you can easily find one of those here and there. I know they were made on bootleg stuff in the past. But if you came out with that Hogan, I don't know if you even came out with the belt that day. If I have to look back at the match. Again, this was WrestleMania 1. This was not the spectacle it would become. You had a lot of guest keepers like Liberace. Muhammad Ali was, I think, a referee or timekeeper. No, the timekeeper was Liberace, or the ring announcer, bell ringer, whatever it may be. Point is, Mr. Wonderful has an elite that matches this. Piper's pretty much any attire is always been blue trunks, brown or black shoes. Doesn't really differentiate. I know he did a little bit something different in WCW. And then the only Mr. T that exists, if you don't count the Jax Rocky line, is, and that was Clobber Lang, or Clobber Lang in street clothes, is this one right here, made by Mattel. It just came out, I think, this or last year. It is a wonderful looking figure. I have no reason to own it, but if you can get your hands on it, it's pretty spendy. It's getting up there. It's definitely a collector's item. It's definitely very surprised and very took us by shock when he was signed and it was shown. But yeah, so how do we do on WrestleMania as a whole? Let's find out. Well, you could not recreate this entire event. You're missing 2 people. That's the problem. The key thing is you're missing 2 people. David Sammartino, and hey, Mattel, people, we could always use another jobber. Leilani Kai, I personally don't collect the female figures. I used to, and then I didn't. Then I used to, and I didn't. I've already got enough figures and enough stuff to collect. I don't need the... Not saying there's nothing wrong with them. They look really cool. They've been getting a lot better. I mean, I used to collect them back in the day when, unfortunately their arms would get fragile and fall off. But I mean, I don't collect them, but there's an audience for her out there. I'm sure people love to recreate stuff. I know that I personally would love to own a figure of each WWF World Champion. But, we're still missing a few people like Pedro Morales, which we might see in WrestleMania 2's thing. We'll stay tuned for that. But I broke down the numbers a little bit based on the matches and how many matches on the card there were and how many were properly represented to how many? Well, obviously it's only 77%. 2 people aren't on the aren't ever made in this card. So you have 22 people that have wrestled on it, but only 20 are ever in figure form. So statistically, only 77% complete. If I broke down a little bit of numbers, and again, if this is something you want to see bigger, let me know and I'll maybe expand it. But if you look down here, I can show you, it says right here, Jakks figures. If you count RA, DA, or Classic Superstars, so that's Ruthless Aggression, that's Deluxe Aggression, that's Classic Superstars. And Ruthless Aggression covers Ring Rage and all those other stuff, all those little mini lines. But 68% complete. You could recreate this show with only 68%. Obviously, you're missing some. Bruno Sammartino. No, he had a figure made. Oh, Mr. T. Mr. T was never made in Jakks Pacific. Unless you count the Rocky line, which that's not the wrestling line. That's separate, and that's a character of Mr. Clobber Lang. But, you know, essentially you could use that. Mattel, 18 figures. Basic and Elite, you got 81%. So you got more of a chance if you have the Mattel collection going. If you're just a strictly old school guy and you found that Legend of Pro Wrestling line, not the FTC stuff, we're talking the Legend of Pro Wrestling, those limited, I think, couple series, maybe 9 waves. Only 27% complete. They did not give you too many people before it went under. LJN, the original, 63%. 14 figures could be used because they do have people that Jakks nor Mattel have covered, like SD Jones. So it's very interesting to see how some companies, you know, built people at the time, and some just never had desire to do anything with anybody. Then of course you have the R3 Tech. Now I just did a little bit of a joke because there's only 2 figures. And to my knowledge, that's Andre and that's Hogan. That's it. Titantron Live figures, remember those guys? Oh, and I know Jakks did Titantron and did Baka and whatnot, and I didn't really add Baka because Baka was they didn't really focus on Legends on Baka, which is the bone crushing action. They didn't really focus on them at all, so I mean, I might add those in later WrestleManias near the New Gen era. But then of course WCW, you just got Hogan and you got Piper. And those are the only 2 guys that WCW Toy Biz would ever make from the old WWF days. I mean, yeah, Ric Flair was made, but he wasn't in any WrestleMania until way later. So, with that being said, I'd like to, thank you. And if you like this, please leave a comment, and I welcome suggestions. Hey, look, I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not a professional podcaster. I'm not even a professional broadcaster. I literally, in my my day job, I teach kids how to drive behind the wheel, and also I teach them driving on Zoom calls. So I'm not a professional of this type of stuff. I don't have cool glitchy, stuff. I don't have cool entrance music. I'll try to figure out how to put that stuff in there, or some sort of sound if it helps. I know that I've seen, countless people who have great stuff and clips and all that kind of stuff. And one day I hope to achieve that. But I'm doing this as a passion project of mine. Maybe in time I'll review figures, but I want to be original. And I looked through, I saw people go gaga over wrestling figures. I saw people countless times review pay-per-views and had clips and opinions and backstories. And I thought that's all cool and well, but I want to do something that was original, something that was different. And that's where I came up with this idea. I looked around, I said, wow, I have a lot of wrestling figures. I like to put together pay-per-views. Can we put together actual accurate pay-per-views with the figures we have out there? Even if I don't have the wrestler, is the wrestler out there exists? I don't collect the LJNs. I didn't grow up during LJN. I grew up during the Baka figure days. So the bone crushing action. My first was Ahmed Johnson. I found it for $5 at Toys R Us. My father bought it for me, and till the day he died, he told me I made a mistake. I should have gone him a damn Hot Wheel toy. But I grew up being a wrestling fan. I've collected them for a long time. But thanks again for taking your time to look at this. Again, comments are welcomed. I've got about 5 of these pre-set up, so I'm gonna post this one on eBay. I'm gonna post this one on YouTube. I'm gonna see how it looks. I might throw up the next one and the next one after that. If it's decent, if people like it and they want to keep doing it. I'm not looking for fame or fortune. Again, this is just a passion of mine to do something that I thought was entertaining. But if it does take off, I've got another thing in mind. I was going to do another stat representation called who made more, Jakks versus Mattel year 1, and I'll go into detail later on that if this takes off. And again, if you hated this, if you have some suggestions, feel free. You have every right to like or dislike it. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. This is not the most flashy presentation, but it's what I can do with the limited skills I have currently until I develop new ones, or I'm shown or told how to do new ones, if that's even a possibility. I want to thank you again. Look forward to seeing you at WrestleMania 2.